Hi, I'm Timmy, and I'm going to start reading 1 hour per day to help me talk better. I'm going to read 1 hour a day to help me talk better. And if you guys want to listen and watch the video to tag along on this journey, be more than happy to do it. But this chapter right here is called Living on the Edge. I'm going to read it to you guys, and it's only 2 pages. I'm going to read it to you guys. Let me know what you guys think about it. Living on the edge. The cashier had handed her decline card back to her with a barely discreet smirk and a smirk that said, "You are just pretending to be a person who has it together." And Sabrina didn't blame Leticia really because she probably would have done the same thing in her position. But fuck, this was the card that she had continued to pay on time, hadn't she? Now, safely far enough away from Chopped, CHOP Chopped, that she was in no danger at Katya coming after her, and Sabrina took out her phone and went to the Capital One's website and typed in her username, Sabrina Blum, and the password, Amila exclamation mark Owen exclamation mark. Password incorrect. The site spat back at her and she realized she was shaking and had mistyped her children's names. She turned down 22nd Street, a block away from the house, ducked into the foyer of a building, and typed in her password again. Immediately, a screen came up that said, "Your account has been locked. Please call us immediately." Shit, she said at a volume that she thought was under her breath, but the security guard, an older, heavy-set man whose pock-marked face could have been the before photo in a proactive commercial, glanced up from the copy of the post. You looking for someone in this building?" he said in an accent that evoked the guys behind the counter at the pizza place in Coney Island that she and Dan used to go to when they first started dating. It's seemingly ironically exotic to take the D train all the way to the end of the line and ride the rickety roller coaster, and they always ended their dates at Toronto's, but they hadn't been to Coney Island in years, and last she'd heard Totonno apostrophe S Tontonio's, it had been destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. "Oh no, sorry, I had the wrong address," she said, and he made an deceptible grunt like noise and went back to his newspaper. She hadn't seen anyone actually reading a newspaper in a while, come to think of it. When she started working in magazine, it seemed as though every other person on the subway was holding a New York Times carefully folded so exactly 1/4 of the page could be read at a time, and she would try to subtitle, peer over people's shoulders to read. Now she looked over people's shoulders to see what game they were playing or what article they had saved for later or what total casual just wanted to say last night was fun type text they were composing. She walked out of the building slowly. Why had Katya wanted to talk to her so badly? She seemed really interested in Isabel and Mark's relationship. That was for sure, but what business was it was of Katya's? Sabrina was the one who should have been scandalized seeing a dick pic from the founder of her company sent to her manager, but she felt strangely calm about it, almost as though on some level she'd been expecting it. Wasn't this how people behaved now? Everyone was always talking about hookup culture. Well, here it was in the flesh, so to speak. But now the memory of the party had been eclipsed by 1,000 other piddling annoyances of a daily life, of finding Owen's shoes and Amelia's hair ties and trying to figure out what the hell she was going to make for the snack day at Owen's school, which fuck was coming up next week, and she had to become with something that was not free and low in sugar. Ugh. And now the Capital One card really was turned off. She was officially out of credit cards to use. She ran through a mental list of bills that would come out of their joint checking account on their first of the mortgage, Millis, school tuition, her grad school loans. They would have enough to cover those as soon as Dan's paycheck went in, and then she could quietly sip home off a few $100s to pay a couple of the cars, maybe get them turned back on. Last night, after Owen and Amelia went to sleep and Dan still wasn't home, she sent off $150 worth of old underwear. Jim from Florida got the pair that she'd actually been wearing that day. He was a repeated customer and he was willing to pay extra for the guarantee that Sky, the college student, had actually been wearing then while she went about her day. There was no way for him to confirm this, of course, save for her note that she had been thinking about him while she wrote a paper in the library at school, but she felt she needed to be strangely scrupulous about this particular detail. She might have a fake identity, but she couldn't bring herself to lie about whether she'd actually worn the pennies or not at all. And she made him pay extra for the privileged $80 for one pair of pink lace boys shorts from the Gap. She took them off, sealed them into a plastic bag, and wrote on the bag in permanent marker XOXOXO Sky. Sabrina put the bag in a padded envelope, wrote Jim's address on it, and on it in what she imagined was a college student's handwriting, and put the return address as the P.O. box in Manhattan. She opened last week, and there was a new customer in St. Louis who has requested that she send him a pair of underwear that she'd worn during hot yoga. Gross, but she wasn't in a position to argue. It wasn't fair, really, that it had come to this. The underwear sales were steady, but they weren't netting as much money as she needed them to. She somehow had only $76 in her PayPal account. If only her useless job paid more. If only Dan made more money. If only she wasn't such a sucker who had a closet full of clothes she didn't wear. People at Takeoff were always talking about their side hustles, selling their hand-knit scarves on ETSY, DJing, hosting pop-up dinner parties. But she had a feeling that if she told any of them about her side hustle, they'd be horrified. And besides, she was feeling so too old for a side hustle. A side hustle when you were 36 was just a second job. Another customer last night, Paul, had asked for a white lace thong from Sky with a strong scent. Sabrina had thought she would find her customers disgusting, or at the very least pathetic, but in fact there was something hot about these guys who knew exactly what turned them on and weren't willing to go to get great lengths to get it. These were guys who knew what they wanted. So what if it was smelly women's underwear from strangers? It wasn't harming anybody, and even though she knew it was fake, she was selling a fantasy. These guys were buying one. She had to admit that it was flattering to be so blatantly wanted by all these men, even if they had no idea who she was or even really what she looked like. She put on the thong and laid down on the bed and took the vibrator out of her nightstand drawer. Did Dan even know she still had a vibrator? True. She barely used it in the past couple of years, but it was still there and the batteries were still working. She turned it on and held it on tight on her vagina for a minute or so. Even though she wasn't exactly in the mood, she still felt herself getting wet. As she masturbated, she found herself thinking not of Dan, but of her friend Natalie. They had hooked up one night in grade school. One of the other first year students, a poet, was having. A poet was having a party, and her parents' broomstone on the Upper West Side. It felt like high school that night, everyone getting drunk on a box of wine and making out in bedrooms. The parents at their country house upstate, the poet making a show of doing coke off their coffee table, but freaking out when somebody broke a wine glass. Sabrina thought about how Natalie hair smelled like clinky, happy perfume and how they'd been smoking in the garden when Natalie turned to her and kissed her and whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the first day of workshop." And now Sabrina moaned quietly. Amila had been getting up in the middle of the night lately and coming into their bed. It was a memory she rarely allowed herself to access, but one she remembered every detail of. They ended up in what seemed to be the poet's little brother's bedroom with a poster of Yankee Stadium on the wall and a dresser topped with soccer trophies. She remembered the way she and Natalie had tumbled onto the twin bed, and then Natalie had unbuttoned and unzipped Sabrina's low-rise jeans. That was when her stomach had been flattened enough to wear low-rise jeans, and slowly kissed her everywhere. And just when she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, Natalie had finally gone down on her, and she came hard and moaned loudly. She and Natalie had hooked up one other time after that, and even though she never dated a woman before, it seemed for a minute like somebody they would actually be a thing. But then she had met Dan, and even though there was a part of her she wanted to keep hooking up with Natalie, the part that wanted to believe that hooking up with a woman wasn't exactly cheating, there was another part of her that felt this had just been a fluke. And besides, Natalie started dating a guy not long after that too, but every so often, like now, she let herself wonder how things might have turned out differently. Well, that's the end of that chapter. And I hope you guys enjoyed, but this is me reading, and I'm telling you guys again, just in case you guys didn't hear or forgot. I'm reading and uploading it on YouTube because I want to work on how the way I talk. And reading, by me reading, it's going to help the way I talk. That's why I'm reading. And I want you guys to be along this journey, and I want you guys to see how I'm coming, how I'm working. I love to read, and if you just listen to me read these books, and maybe you guys can learn something as well just by me reading to you. I hope you guys love what you hear and like what you see. And I'm not no professional reader. Reading was not my best subject, but the more I read, and just people in general, the more you read, the better you'll be able to read. And that's facts. So my goal is to read about my goal is I want to read about um 3 to 4 books, chapter books, like this thick chapter, 3 or 4 books this thick, in about 1 month or 2 months. And I want to read about 101 or 150 books throughout the whole year of 2026. And every book I read, I'm going to read you guys at least a chapter or two. And maybe you guys can learn something. You never know. But I'm gone. Peace.